So I reread Bird by Bird by Lamott last week, and I went in expecting to have all these things I was going to be pushing back on. I thought maybe it would be dated, or maybe I'd outgrown it, or maybe I'd find some of the advice just too saccharine or something. But I read it, I finished it, and I loved it so much more than I did the first time I read it. I actually feel like this time round, I realized why so many writers love this book. Whereas the first time around, I was like, it's good. But now I'm just like, yeah, it's great. And I think timing matters here because I'm juggling a million, billion, bajillion things right now. And that has made me feel so overwhelmed. I'm building the Uncharted studio. I'm growing this YouTube channel. I'm working on the rough draft of my third manuscript. I'm planning a trip and a wedding. And on top of that, I've got care responsibilities, I've got disabilities, work, life. There's just always something. And I feel like I picked up this book when I needed it the most because Bird by Bird reminded me of something fundamental. And that's that I don't have to do it all at once, that the way through is bird by bird. But that's not really what I want to talk about today, or rather it's part of it, but it's not the whole picture, because what Lamott is doing with this book isn't just giving you permission to write badly, she's giving you permission to write what's true. And that's a completely different thing. There's this passage in the book where she talks about her students and why they want to write. And some of them would basically say, in effect, I will not be silenced again. They were good children who felt invisible. They saw awful things, and when they tried to talk about it, they were punished for it. So they stopped talking about it. Now they look at their lives, at life in general, and they don't want to be sent to their rooms for doing so. But it's very hard to find their own voice, and it's tempting to assume someone else's. And all of that really landed for me. Because I think every writer, every creative has something that they want to say, something they need to say. And often it comes from a place of pain and from painful experiences. It comes from experiences that just shaped us in ways we're still trying to understand and unpack. But what Lamott is saying is this: it's the thing you need to say, that's not secondary to the craft. That's not something that you figure out after you've written the perfect sentence. That's the whole point. Your morality, your values, your voice, your truth, that's what brings you to the page, and that's what belongs on the page first. Shaping comes later. And in this moment, when I'm so overwhelmed and scattered and trying to hold just too many things at once, that permission to prioritize what's true over what's polished and to write the rough version and trust the process, that's just what I needed to hear. I will not be silenced. Again, that's what Lamott's students are saying, and I think that's what every writer is saying, whether they know it or not. The first thing that hit me when rereading this was that Lamott refuses to separate the act of writing from the life of being a writer. She talks about jealousy, about competitiveness, about feeling broke and exhausted, and she talks about raising her son as a single mother while trying to write, and she talks about her own chaos. And what that does is makes you trust her, because she's not selling you some fantasy. She's saying, this is real, this is hard, and you can do it anyway. And that's so comforting. Throughout this book, she kept coming back to this idea that your job as a writer is to tell the truth. Not the marketable truth, not the polished truth, the actual truth. She writes that you need to find a story that only you can tell because it comes from your specific life and your specific pain and your specific observations, and nobody else has that exact same combination. So if you don't write it, it doesn't exist, and it will never exist. And that is both so terrifying and so encouraging for me. It's enormous, and it takes the pressure off of trying to write like somebody else or to write what you think people want to read. She says, write what is true to you, write what you see, write what you need to say, and do it messy, do it rough, do it imperfect, because the alternative is silence. Everybody knows about the shitty first draft chapter. It's probably the most famous thing in this book, and it's brilliant, but I want to talk about what I think it's actually saying, because I'm living that chapter right now. I'm on the rough draft, the first draft, kind of first, of my third manuscript, and rough is the right word for it. It's messy. There are plot holes and plot threads that don't connect, and I don't know if they ever will connect, and there are character moments that feel flat, and there's these moments where I'm building tension, and it's just, whatever, where's the tension? There are paragraphs I know I'm gonna just rip apart later, and I used to feel shame about that. Like, shouldn't I be better at this by now? Shouldn't the first draft be closer to what I have in my head? And Lamott says that the first draft is just you getting it out. It's basically like an archaeological dig. You're excavating your story so you can see what's actually there. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be honest, it's supposed to be vulnerable, it's supposed to be true, and you're supposed to let the characters speak through you without your inner critic just shutting them down all the time. And I feel like I've let my inner critic just go on a rampage. She has this line about perfectionism and how perfectionists are blocks. She says, perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It'll keep you cramped and insane your whole life. And it's the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft. I think perfectionism is based on the obsessive belief that if you run carefully enough, hitting each stepping stone just right, you won't have to die. The truth is, you will die anyway, and that a lot of people who aren't even looking at their feet are going to do a whole lot better than you and have a whole lot more fun while they're doing it. She recognizes that the perfectionist voice in your head is something so loud and it stops you from writing anything at all. At least it can. So what you have to do is give yourself permission to write badly, or maybe more accurately, it's to say to write roughly, to write the first version without judgment, because judgment comes after, shaping comes after, but first you have to just get it out, get it down on paper. And that's where I am. I'm writing the rough version. It's mediocre in places, in other places it's abysmal, it's terrible, it should be burnt. And that's exactly where it's supposed to be, because the alternative is not writing at all, and that's just worse. It's worse. It breaks my heart thinking of this story never being written. So think of your story that way maybe too. There are so many moments in this book where I just had to stop and sit with what she was saying. The first was in her chapter on characters. She talks about how you have to let your characters be themselves, not what you want them to be, but who they actually are. And the way to do that is to immerse yourself in their lives. Imagine their bedroom, imagine what they eat for breakfast, imagine what they're ashamed of, and become them enough so that when you write their dialogue, it's not you speaking, it's them speaking through you. I've been keeping that in mind while working on this manuscript, because my protagonists, she's doing things that I wouldn't do. She's doing morally questionable things, to put it nicely. And for a long time, I was trying to make her more sympathetic, more likable. And Lamott basically says, stop. Let her be who she is. Stop trying to make her likable. That's not your job. Your job is to make her real. And real people are complicated and they're messy. And sometimes they do the wrong thing. The second part that made me pause was her whole thesis about morality and art. She says that your values belong in your work, not preachy, not in a heavy-handed way, but present. She says that writers have an obligation, not to be perfect, but to tell the truth as they see it and to care about the impact that that truth is going to have. So your book has a way of touching someone, of saying that you're not alone, or maybe even changing how someone sees the world. And that's something not to be taken lightly. It's something to be done intentionally. And I think about both my writing and the Uncharted studio and why I started this channel and this journey. And that's this exact same impulse. It's me wanting to help creatives live intentionally. I want to show them that there is another way, that you don't always have to choose between creating and resting, and between ambition and balance, between, being an artist and being a person. And that's what I'm trying to say through everything I do. And Lamott gives you permission to let that message live in your fiction too, to write stories that matter to you, and, not just stories that you think are going to sell, but rather stories that are going to have that kind of impact in the world or on one person that you want to have. For me, it's to make people feel less alone. It's to make people feel understood and to, I don't know, hopefully just make this world a little bit better than I found it. Then there's her chapter on voice, where she talks about how it's hard to find your own voice. The quote I said earlier about not being silenced, that's from this chapter. She talks about how tempting it is to assume the voice of someone else, of, writing like an author you love or an author you think is successful. And she says, don't, because the world doesn't need another version of B. Schwab, of Stephen King, of whoever. It needs a version that only you can give. There's this line that really stuck with me also, where she says something like, your voice will emerge if you just keep showing up and telling the truth. You don't have to find it, you just have to stop hiding. And I really love that, because I feel like very often we add so much pressure, or at least I do. I had so much pressure to the idea of finding my voice as a writer or as an artist or as a creator. And instead, what I just need to do is strip away all of that and write, and that'll come. This is so encouraging. So there are a few things I'm actually gonna take away from this book into my practice moving forward. The first is permission. It's permission to write this rough draft, this imperfect, shitty first draft, but, not as an excuse to be lazy, but as a deliberate creative strategy without apologizing for it. I'm gonna write my truth first and then focus on shaping it later. And I'm gonna trust the process, even when it feels like a mess, even when I keep seeing this decline. I mentioned in last week's creator log that, in January I wrote, over 25,000 words. In February, almost 16. I think those are the right numbers. And in March, I wrote just past 5.5K. And that decline just feels like such a failure. But instead, reading Lamott, I just sit here with the thought that maybe that's part of the process, and that's something that I need to trust instead. The second thing is to let my characters be themselves, even when it's uncomfortable, or maybe especially when it's uncomfortable, because that's where the story lives. That's where reality is. People are a mess, and even though it's uncomfortable to share that mess, it's true, it's real. And the third is to remember that my job as a writer isn't to write what's marketable or what's safe or what, I think is likable. It's to write what's true. It's to talk about the things that are important to me and to challenge people, to challenge myself through the process. I need to let my values, my observations, my specific experiences live on the page, because that's the only thing I have that nobody else has. Lamott talks about how writing is fundamentally about connection. It's about saying to the reader, you're not alone. I've felt this too. I've seen this too. And that's something that's just so worth doing, even if the process is hard and challenging and painful and rough and, not going according to plan. So that's what Bird by Bird did for me, this time around at least. I feel like it didn't just give me permission to write badly. It gave me permission to write what matters, to prioritize truth over polish, to let my voice and my values live in the work. And in a month where I'm juggling everything, that permission to focus on what's true and what's real and important, it matters so much to me. If you haven't read Bird by Bird yet, I suggest doing so soon and going into it with a question in mind, like, what do I need to hear right now? Because this book has so much to offer, and if you've already read it, maybe reread it. I'd also love to hear what your thoughts are and what your key takeaways were. Next week, we're gonna dig into something that connects to this directly, and that's why you can absolutely love writing, maybe even more than anything, but not be able to make yourself sit down and do it. Because knowing what you want to say and actually sitting down to say it and having the capacity and ability to say it, those are completely different things. So I'll see you next week. Ooh, and I'm gonna leave a link here-ish for my review of On Writing by Stephen King, where I share a lot more thoughts about another staple for writers and creatives. Right, yeah. I'll see you next week.